With her own brother, she had 14 children, the purest woman from the Kentucky forests. What would you do if you discovered your family concealed secrets so profound they could shake the very foundations of society itself? The Appalachian Mountains hold stories that seldom reach our ears, lost between isolated valleys and communities living on the fringes of time. Today, I will reveal to you a case that lay buried in the shadows for nearly 2 centuries. Martha Sullivan was not merely a woman of the countryside. In her womb, she carried the weight of a family tradition that defied the laws of nature and society. What you are about to discover in the next few minutes may change forever your vision of family loyalty's limits and the price paid by those born from pure blood. If you enjoy historical investigations that uncover the darkest truths of the human condition, be sure to subscribe to the channel right now. Prepare yourself to learn a story rarely told outside close academic circles. A narrative that shows how witnesses like isolation and distorted beliefs can create generations marked by a devastating genetic legacy. Between the deep valleys and green hills of Kentucky, where sunlight rarely penetrates the dense tree cover, only stacked stones and rotting boards remain. These are the silent traces of the Sullivan property, founded in 1798, a place the region's inhabitants avoid to this very day. Through the ancient oaks, the wind seems to carry whispers, as if the earth itself still holds the memory of children born there with deformed faces and incomplete minds. When we look upon these ruins, we must understand we are not merely contemplating the remains of a house. We stand before the physical testimony of a terrible philosophy, the belief that the purity of family blood must be preserved at any cost. The farmland, far from the thunder that often punished these mountains, witnessed the muffled cries of babies born with extra fingers and malformed hearts, while the family patriarch, Ebenezer Sullivan, proudly proclaimed, "Our blood will remain pure as gold, without the taint of outsiders." As a dark omen of what was to come in this story, the clouds gathered once more over the ruins. If you wish to follow more cases like this, which move all of society and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any investigation. The Sullivan property stretched for approximately 320 acres of rugged land in the mountains of Harlan County, Kentucky. A 2-story wooden house with 8 rooms rose at its center, surrounded by barns, stables, and smaller huts for hired workers. A rigid internal hierarchy was kept by the family. At the top was Ebenezer, followed by his sons, then women born as Sullivans, and finally the temporary workers who never stayed more than a single season. The day began at 4 a.m. with the sound of an iron bell echoing through the valley, calling everyone to their functions. For 16 hours a day, the women spent their time preparing food, weaving clothes, and caring for the young ones, while the men worked at hunting, agriculture, and occasional trade with distant villages. Control was exercised through constant surveillance. Strategically positioned windows allowed Ebenezer to observe every movement on the property. The family chapel, built from dark oak trunks, housed not only prayers but also meetings where weddings between cousins and close relatives were decided. Check now if you are already subscribed to the channel. The creak of the floorboards announced the patriarch's arrival, and everyone would fall absolutely silent. When snow covered the mountains and completely isolated the property for months, births occurred in the basement of the main house, away from external eyes. And it was during the particularly severe winter of 1823 that Martha Sullivan came into the world, her penetrating blue eyes seeming to contain knowledge far beyond her age. That child unknowingly carried the future of the family lineage in her womb. Extraordinary skills that distinguished her among family members were shown by Martha Sullivan as she grew. By the age of 9, she already knew the medicinal properties of 73 different plants growing in the surrounding forests. Even the itinerant pastor who visited the region annually was impressed by her ability to memorize biblical texts. While the other girls in the family remained confined to the property's limits, Martha received special permission from her father to accompany the men on occasional commercial trips to the village of Cumberland, 12 miles away. In these rare forays into the outside world, she carefully observed social interactions, absorbing information about medicine, law, and world news, while never revealing details about her own family. Within the Sullivan community, Martha held a privileged position. She was the only woman authorized to attend family meetings where important issues were discussed. The inhabitants of the surrounding area sought out her healing skills, allowing her to cross the invisible border between Sullivan isolation and the rest of society. "The girl has the gift of healing hands and a language that does not speak lies," the people said, trusting her while remaining fearful of the rest of the family. During full moon nights, Martha could be seen gathering specific herbs that only flourish in that light, moving like a shadow between the trees, carrying knowledge passed down by generations of Sullivan women. The paradox resided precisely in this: the more valuable she became to the external community, the more indispensable she became for the family's internal plans, especially to her brother Jeremiah, only 2 years older, who watched her with growing interest as they both matured. Leave in the comments, never give up the truth, if you believe justice must reach all the oppressed. The horrors on the Sullivan property manifested themselves gradually, like shadows that lengthen at dusk. First came the whispers about the birth of cousin Robert in 1825 with 6 fingers on each hand, unable to utter anything but primitive grunts, kept in the attic and fed through a hatch. Then came cousin Elizabeth, born in 1827 from the marriage between an uncle and niece, her skin covered in bluish spots and eyes so distant it seemed impossible to focus both on the same object. In 1829, Frederick was born, the son of first-degree cousins, who at the age of 3 still could not hold his head up alone, dying during a particularly violent seizure before he turned 5. With each problematic birth, Martha observed the adults' reactions: denial, rationalization, and finally, supernatural or religious explanations that never questioned the practice of consanguineous marriages. When the daughter of cousins Henry and Victoria was born without eyes in 1831, Martha witnessed the patriarch Ebenezer declare, "It is a divine trial, not a signal to change our ways." Quietly, at that moment, Martha's inner transformation began, like water that slowly erodes stone. Her face remained impassive as she helped the midwife, but something fundamental had changed inside her. In her diary, found decades later, she wrote with trembled letters, "I saw the eyeless face of an innocent today, and realized it was not God who created this incomplete creature, but the choices of men who consider themselves above the laws of nature." Martha's world definitively collapsed on April 16, 1834, when her youngest sister, Sarah, just 9 years old, was declared ready for the family pact. Sarah, a girl with a crystalline laugh and golden hair, was the only person Martha openly showed affection for. The two shared a small room under the roof of the main house, where Martha secretly taught her sister to read and write, contrary to family rules that considered female education unnecessary beyond basic domestic knowledge. That spring morning, Sarah was taken to the family chapel, where the patriarch announced her future marriage to her 42-year-old cousin, Herbert Sullivan, known for his cruelty to animals and violent temperament. When Martha protested during the ceremony, she was forced to witness her sister's punishment. Her hair was forcibly cut, followed by 3 days of confinement in the granary without proper water. On the 3rd day, when they finally allowed Martha to bring water to Sarah, she found her sister burning with fever, raving about black angels with iron claws. For 72 uninterrupted hours, Martha spent her time applying cold compresses and preparing medicinal infusions, holding the small, warm hand between her own. At dawn on the 4th day, she felt Sarah's fingers relax within her grasp. With no tears or external mourning, Martha washed her sister's body with wild rose water, wrapped her in white linen that had been fabric for her own layette, and placed a small cloth doll, the last secret gift for Sarah, next to her body before the burial. That night, alone under the stare of the stars, Martha took a silent oath before the simple tomb. For every tear not shed, for every suffocated scream, there would be a reckoning. The system that propped up the Sullivan property was composed of mutually reinforced authority. At the center, Ebenezer Sullivan, then 63, ruled with a firm hand and religious rhetoric, citing distorted biblical passages to justify isolation and internal marriages. His firstborn, Jeremiah, 25, performed physical punishment, having developed particular methods of discipline that left no visible marks, using wet towels to beat transgressors. Uncle Thaddeus, Ebenezer's younger brother, supervised the financial aspects, making semi-annual trips to sell the property's products and buy supplies, occasionally bringing desperate women from distant villages to partially renew the family blood. Reverend Blackwood, not a relative but complicit for convenience, visited the property quarterly to officiate unions and baptisms, receiving generous compensation for his silence. The growing tension reached an irreversible point during the celebration of Ebenezer's 65th anniversary in October 1836. In the presence of the entire gathered family, the patriarch announced, "To ensure the continuity of our purest lineage, I declare that Martha and Jeremiah will unite their lives and blood on the next full moon." Martha, then 19, witnessed her brother's face break into a smile as her relatives applauded the decision. That same night, she listened from behind the door to the detailed plan Ebenezer revealed to Jeremiah. "You will produce the next generation of Sullivan leaders. Your children, born of the purest blood of our lineage, will be raised under my direct supervision to continue our tradition when I am gone." Martha understood then that she had reached the point of no return. It was not just her future at stake, but generations yet to be born. On November 7, 1836, Martha was subjected to the purification ritual that preceded all Sullivan marriages. Naked and bathed in herbs by 3 older women of the family, she remained silent as they sang old songs brought from the British Isles. Her long brown hair was braided with white ribbons symbolizing purity, while Aunt Agnes whispered instructions on her marital duties, with details that made her stomach turn. Dressed in a white nightgown made especially for the occasion, she was led to the center of the family circle where Ebenezer and Jeremiah were waiting. The patriarch held her right hand and his son's left, lifting them above his head as he proclaimed, "This blood belongs only to the Sullivans, will remain among the Sullivans, and will generate new Sullivans." The ceremony was interrupted when Martha suddenly fainted, falling hard against the wooden floor. The family doctor, Dr. Thompson, an alcoholic man whose license to practice medicine had been revoked years earlier, stated it was merely feminine nervousness and recommended rest until the wedding day. During her supposed recovery, Martha was kept under constant surveillance in the room she had once shared with Sarah. Through the narrow window, she watched the preparations for her wedding, the decoration of the chapel with pine branches, the construction of the new cabin where she would live with Jeremiah, the relatives arriving from neighboring properties. Her previously expressive and lively face became an impassive mask. "The girl has lost her soul," commented one of the aunts. "It is the price of purity," replied another. On the night of November 11, 1836, Martha executed the plan she had been silently elaborating since Sarah's death. Using knowledge acquired during years of observation and secret study, she mingled a combination of sleep-inducing herbs with the celebration drinks. While the Sullivans drank and celebrated the union scheduled for the next day, Martha remained sober, watching the heavy eyes and increasingly slow movements of the guests. When the last one had fallen into a deep sleep, including the guards designated to watch her, she put into action each element of her meticulously structured plan. First, from a hiding place under a loose floorboard, she retrieved a small bag containing gold coins she had collected over the years by secretly selling medicinal herbs to the surrounding inhabitants. She then put on previously prepared men's clothes, cutting her long hair short with the knife she kept sharp under the mattress. She gathered a group of 5 children, all born with deformities from consanguineous unions, who were kept hidden in various corners of the property. With silent and precise movements, she led the children from the main house to the stable, where 2 horses were already saddled. The date chosen was not accidental. She had purposely coincided it with the new moon, ensuring maximum darkness for the escape. The countdown she had mentally kept for months had finally reached 0. "Today we are born again," she whispered to the frightened children as she helped them onto the horses. On the Sullivan property, wedding preparations reached their peak. Oil lanterns illuminated the path from the main house to the chapel, where Reverend Blackwood, already drunk, rehearsed the ceremony's words. In the room destined for the bride, 3 Sullivan aunts arranged the white dress over the empty bed, arguing over who would have the honor of placing the traditional family veil. In the kitchen, a whole pig roasted slowly over the fire, while women prepared breads and candies for the feast that would last 2 days, according to tradition. Miles away, at the same time, Martha Sullivan performed each phase of her plan with watchmaker's accuracy. In the shadows of the dense forest, she applied dark dyes made from green walnuts and coal to the children's faces and her own for camouflage. Two of the little ones, unable to ride alone due to limb deformities, were tied to her body with leather straps. The oldest of the five, a 12-year-old boy who had never developed articulate speech but understood instructions, firmly held the reins of the second horse, where the other two children balanced. The distant sound of music and laughter was gradually replaced by the noise of hooves against the soft forest soil and the occasional hoot of an owl. When the first light of dawn began to tinge the horizon, the small group had reached the plan's first stage, an abandoned hunter's cabin, 15 miles from the Sullivan property, where Martha had secretly stocked supplies for months. The combined signal, 3 short whistles, was given to confirm they had reached the first safe point. In the early hours of November 12, 1836, Martha Sullivan executed her plan in meticulously timed steps. First phase ** infiltration of the patriarch's quarters where family documents were kept. With silent movements learned from observing hunters, she recovered birth certificates and the family record book documenting generations of consanguineous marriages. Second phase * strategic isolation, cutting the alarm bell strings and removing the wheels from the carts to hinder pursuit. Third phase * liberation of the hidden children, 5 small ones kept in various secret compartments on the property due to their visible deformities. For each adult who had participated directly in the cruelties, Martha left a specific mark. For the uncle who had flogged Sarah, a strand of her sister's golden hair over his pillow. For cousin Herbert, intended for Sarah, a child's drawing the girl had made weeks before she died. Leaning over Jeremiah in his deep sleep, she whispered in his ear, "Sullivan blood ends here." In Patriarch Ebenezer's room, she left the record book open to the page documenting the birth and premature death of 23 children in the last 15 years, all with congenital deformities, with a single sentence written in the margin: "It was not God who created these monsters." By the time the fire began to consume the barn where Sarah had been punished to death, Martha was already guiding the 5 children along a forest trail, leaving behind only silence. The exodus led by Martha followed a precise script. First, the stop at the hunter's cabin, where they exchanged the horses marked with the Sullivan symbol for less identifiable mules. Then, they split into 2 groups for less visibility, following secondary trails and avoiding main roads where news of the escape would surely circulate. Martha had arranged in advance a meeting with Rebecca Thornton, a midwife and herbalist who lived on the fringes of society and sympathized with her cause after witnessing the results of consanguineous marriages in Sullivan children occasionally brought for treatment. In Rebecca's simple house, Martha organized a makeshift ritual. She cut a lock of hair from each child, burned them along with the wedding dress she had secretly removed from the main house, mixed the ashes with soil, and planted a young oak in this symbolically enriched earth. "This tree will mark the end of one cycle and the beginning of another," she explained to the children, who watched with wide eyes. The plan included calculated resistance. Martha knew some children, conditioned to the oppressive environment, would fear the unknown outside world. For the 6-year-old girl who refused to leave the hiding place at Rebecca's house, she softly sang old lullabies until the child fell asleep in her arms. To the older boy who tried to flee back to the security of the Sullivan property, she offered no orders, but a choice, the first true choice any Sullivan had ever received. When they finally departed, they formed a small column, Martha ahead, each child carrying only a significant personal object, and Rebecca closing the rear. In the distance, smoke was still visible, rising like a gray column against the November blue sky, marking the place where generations of Sullivans had perpetuated their cycle of isolation and genetic degeneration. News of the events on the Sullivan property spread like wildfire. The Harlan County Sheriff, initially reluctant to investigate the isolated family's internal affairs, was forced to act when flames consumed a significant part of the property. His official report, preserved in the county archives, describes with bureaucratic language what he found: structures damaged by seemingly deliberate fire, several individuals in a comatose state from an unknown substance, and the disappearance of an adult woman, Mess, and 5 minors. Correspondence between local and state authorities reveals increasing alarm. The Sullivan case represents a potential threat to the social and moral order. Maximum discretion is recommended. By December 1836, records indicate 3 other isolated properties in the Appalachian Mountains, all with histories of marriages between close relatives, suffered similar events, children with deformities missing, compromising family documents mysteriously exposed to the community. In February 1837, the governor of Kentucky received a confidential report mentioning the emergence of a Sullivan method, a term describing the systematic release of children from consanguineous unions and the exposure of family records. The press of the time, limited by social conventions, referred only indirectly to the events, mentioning disturbances in isolated communities and a renewed interest of authorities in marriage practices in the mountainous regions. Among families who kept similar traditions, however, panic was palpable. Private documents reveal frantic correspondence: "We must disperse the children immediately." In contrast, hopeful whispers circulated among marginalized communities and abolitionist groups about the woman who frees the forgotten. The state's response to Martha's escape and the subsequent liberation wave was quick and severe. In March 1837, Governor James Clark secretly authorized a special force of 6 experienced rangers, led by Captain William Harrington, a veteran of the Indian Wars known for his relentless efficiency. Using tracking techniques honed during years of pursuing fugitive slaves, they followed the group's trail through 5 counties. A progressive siege strategy gradually reduced the available territory for hiding, while agents infiltrated marginal communities, offering rewards for information. The first capture occurred in April 1837, 2 of the children found in a Shaker community that had welcomed them without question. By June, the siege tightened when a traveling merchant, tempted by a substantial reward, revealed he had transported a young woman with short hair accompanied by 3 deformed children across the Ohio River. The final betrayal came from an unexpected source. Reverend Michaels, who had initially offered the group sanctuary in his small rural church, gave up their location after authorities pressured him, threatening to investigate his own questionable financial practices. The decisive confrontation took place on August 17, 1837, in an isolated cabin near Cincinnati. Unofficial reports describe how Martha, realizing they were surrounded, organized the escape of the remaining 3 children through a previously prepared tunnel while she remained to delay the pursuers. Witnesses say that when the rangers broke down the door, they found her calmly sitting at a table with the Sullivan documents organized before her and a small, empty bottle of poison in her hand. Her last words, recorded by Captain Harrington in his personal diary, were, "Sullivan blood now runs free around the world. You will never find them all." In the decades following Martha Sullivan's death, her story gradually transformed from a family scandal into a regional legend. Among the isolated communities of the Appalachians, a body of oral traditions developed around her figure. Hunters swore they saw a woman with short hair guiding children through the forest on new moon nights. Midwives discreetly offered protection to newborns with deformities, citing the Matha way as justification. Families that maintained consanguineous marriage practices reported night visits from a female presence who left small cloth dolls, similar to the one Martha had placed in Sarah's coffin, as a silent warning. Objects associated with her story acquired near-mythical status. The Sullivan family record book, paradoxically saved from the fire, passed through several hands before being anonymously donated to the Kentucky Historical Society in 1867, where it remains as an important document on the period's matrimonial practices. In isolated rural communities, folkloric songs preserved her memory through coded verses, asterisk, "The midnight lady takes the marked small, when the moon hides and the watchmen sleep." Asterisk from 1870 onward, a significant decline in marriages between close relatives occurred in the mountainous regions, a phenomenon academic historians attribute to growing social and economic integration, while local tradition credits the Sullivan effect. Discreet pilgrimages to Martha's alleged burial site, a small, unidentified mound near the Ohio-Kentucky border, became an annual tradition among families with histories of congenital deficiencies. In impressive contrast to official records that minimized her existence, popular memory turned Martha Sullivan into a lasting symbol of resistance against practices that sacrificed innocent lives on the altar of distorted traditions. In certain isolated Appalachian communities, even today, when a child is born with extra fingers or other signs of consanguinity, the elders whisper, "This child has the touch of Martha." If you have watched this far, it is because you care about these stories that have marked our country forever. Leave a comment saying, "I watched here," so I can get to know you and know who really cares about the search for historical truth. Like this video if the story of Martha Sullivan touched your heart. Share it so that Martha Sullivan's memory is never forgotten.